I'm gonna share my screen. Right. Can someone confirm that you can see the first slide?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, so again, thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled that at least 70 at my last count people are here interested hearing about beavers. I like to kick things off a little strangely by a little pop quiz. This is a camera trap photo from my master's research, and the question is, how many monkeys are in this photo? And I will tell you why in a minute. But if you want to put your answer into the chat, maybe Deborah, if you could just shout out some of the answers. Just a few seconds here. Take a look. How many monkeys are in the photo?
So I'm seeing guesses of 3 and 4.
Okay.
Most people are saying 3.
Okay.
Couple said 4. That's the most I'm seeing. 8. Someone said 8.
Oh, wow. Okay. The answer to this question has changed over the time I've been doing this, but so far, to my knowledge, the answer to this question is that there are 5 monkeys. And I don't know if you all can see my cursor or not, but there are
Couple
2.
did say 5.
Okay. Yay. If you said 5, that is the most accurate answer to my knowledge at this point. There are 2 monkeys climbing up the bamboo pole to this banana tree. There is a white monkey on the ground to the left of the bamboo pole. And then there are a couple of other monkeys on the left-hand side of the photo, kind of where the light foreground meets the dark background. It's hard to see, I know, but I like to just show this photo as a little warm-up and an introduction to who I am, because my background, before I started working with beavers, I was studying monkeys who steal farmers' crops. And this is an endangered species of monkey called the Moor macaque. They only live on the island of Sulawesi in Indonesia. And one of the ways I was studying this conflict was through the use of camera traps. So I just like to warm us up with a little monkey picture because people aren't usually expecting that during a beaver talk. All right, the next pop quiz I have for you is, which one is the beaver? Same thing here. You can type your answer in the chat, and Deborah, you can see what's trending.
So most people are saying B. One person said C.
Okay.
Oh, a D. We had someone thought a D was a beaver,
Okay.
and then another C. One said
Okay.
A.
Mostly
Few
BC.
more B's.
Okay.
And another
Awesome.
D. Okay.
Okay. So this is the first opportunity for me to use a beaver pun. I stumped you all. None of these are beavers. A is a groundhog. B is a nutria, which definitely does kind of look like a beaver from this angle, but those long white whiskers are the giveaway here. C is a prairie dog. D, if you guess D, technically you're the closest. That's a muskrat, and I chopped off the tail in the photo so you couldn't see. And then E, of course, is a platypus. F is a river otter. So again, just a fun little way to kick off the talk. The reason why I made this slide is because mostly in my work with kids, but even sometimes with adults, there are a lot of furry brown critters that go in the water, or some don't, that people confuse with beavers. So I just like to do that for fun. So getting a little bit into just the basics of what the animal we are talking about tonight. It is in the rodent family. Latin name of our North American beaver is Castor canadensis. There are 2 species in the castor genus in the world. So there's the North American beaver, and then there's also the Eurasian beaver, which is Castor feber. And although they're rodents, beavers kind of buck a lot of the rodent stereotypes that we typically have in our heads. So they live in social groups. usually of between 2 and up to 10, sometimes more individuals. And they are relatively long-lived for rodents. They can live into their 20s. More often than not, that's in captivity and not in the wild. Um, and they do have some predators. So in our region, those predators might include coyotes, bobcats, and bears occasionally. Larger raptors, especially for the younger kits when they're really floaty in the water, they can get taken from the air. And then also on the previous slide, that river otter is a predator of the beaver that people don't often know about. Beavers do not just eat wood like a lot of people think, and they also don't eat fish like some people believe. They are what scientists would call choosy generalist herbivores. They eat tons of different species of vegetation, lots of different plant parts, but they're not eating any meat. Of course, the beavers are very well adapted for a semi-aquatic lifestyle. In the image on this slide, you can see some of those adaptations pointed out in a funny way. They are more comfortable in the water. They are more graceful in the water. They feel safer in the water. But of course, they don't live their entire lives under the water. So semi-aquatic. And the way that they maintain that lifestyle is, of course, by often building structures that we can see more often than we see the beavers themselves. If we are out in beaver habitat, their presence on the landscape can be very conspicuous in the form of, tree stumps, lodges, which are the structures that they live inside of, and then also the dams that they build to slow the water down, spread it out, and create the ponds that are deep enough that provide that ideal habitat for them. The caveat here is that beavers don't always build dams or lodges. A beaver could be living in a larger river system and where the water flow is too fast, the water is too deep, where a dam is not going to make any sense. In that case, beavers might just be living in bank dens along the side of the river and still having all of those other habitat needs met. But we do associate building with beavers, and very often that is what they do a lot of. So just a little bit of beaver history here in North America. There have been the North American beavers, they had ancestors going back at least 1 million years. A couple of pictures here show that there used to be a giant beaver called Castoroides. Only went extinct about 10,000 years ago, which is very fascinating to think about. They're described as ecologically functioning like hippos on the landscape. So they were still herbivores and just very large beavers walking around. Way before that, the picture on the bottom left-hand corner shows the burrows of a species called paleocastor, which they built these corkscrew-shaped burrows straight into the ground, which are sometimes called devil's corkscrews because settlers did not know what those were. But so those are the ancestors to our modern day beavers. Up until the fur trade, which began in roughly the mid-1600s, there was anything between 60 to 400 million beavers estimated to live in North America. The closest number I've seen to that is more like 12 to 14 million. And then at the height of the fur trade, that number dropped to only about 100,000 beavers. So of course, beavers were being hunted not only to make these felted items like hats because of the nature of beaver fur, but also competition between the fur companies, the creation of fur deserts, and all these political reasons kind of tied into it. So we almost lost our population of North American beavers, and it has been slowly climbing back up since then. Today, there's somewhere between 10 and 50 million beavers. No one really knows how many beavers we have. It's much harder to count beavers than you would think. Scientists can't do census counts with beavers like they can a lot of other species because there's not a really convenient way to tag a semi-aquatic animal that doesn't really have a neck for a collar. So anyway, we don't quite know. There are some millions of beavers today in North America. Here in the state of Virginia, Um, Beavers were completely extirpated in the early 1900s and then reintroduced in the 30s. And then by the 50s, they were reopening trapping seasons. Again, in the state of Virginia, what we generally know is that beavers have recolonized much of that historic range where there is still suitable habitat that's not completely developed. And in terms of interacting with beavers today here in the state, no permit is required to trap and kill beavers if they are causing damage. Relocation is not an option, and you will hear, if you are in the beaver conversation at all, you'll hear a lot of talk about beaver relocation. And it is happening in other states, but not officially here in Virginia. And like I said, we don't really know the current population size. I was just on a panel last week at the Rappahannock River Symposium with a wetland ecologist with DWR who said the same thing, like, we don't know how many beavers are here, but what we do see is a general trend of an increasing population. And anecdotally, of course, through my work, I've definitely observed that as well. This graph is just to give you a little data. This is reported trapping harvest in the state by year since 2014. So you can see that trapping is trending down. What this graph doesn't show us is that it doesn't distinguish between recreational versus nuisance trapping, which would be a different story. Recreational trapping isn't happening so much anymore. The pelts don't have much value. Some people still do it for kind of like cultural heritage reasons, but not too often. Nuisance trapping is definitely most of the beaver trapping that's going on at this point. So that means when a beaver is causing a problem for people. And then again, just a little graphic here to show that from those numbers, the counties that are repeatedly in the top 3 for harvest are Caroline and Greensville counties. All the ones with the red dots are kind of repeated, kind of beaver hotspots, let's call it. So let's talk about why beavers matter. I break this down into 3 different categories. So we're going to talk about their behaviors and then those dam structures that they build. First of all, foraging, it does benefit the landscape by promoting plant growth of certain species that do resprout after beavers have chewed them. When beavers take down larger trees, it creates gaps in the forest canopy, which allows for understory growth. And then beavers also dig canals, which provide good microhabitat and habitat connectivity for other little critters like, tadpoles and a lot of aquatic insects and that sort of thing. So that's just by beavers eating, they are providing these benefits. And then by building their dams and ponds, there's so much more, and not even all of it fits on the slide. And I hate to kind of sit here and list things, but overall, when a beaver builds a dam, they are intending to create a pond by slowing the water down, spreading it out on the landscape. What they want out of that is a pond that's deep enough for them to escape predators and to survive the winter if the water happens to freeze. And what that does for the landscape and for other species is all of these other kind of like ripple effect benefits, such as basically just improving overall water quality, and providing habitat for so many other species. You can get really granular and scientific into some of these benefits. I will let you read those, and we can chat more about them if you're interested. But I like to also, here's some more of them on the next slide. I mostly like to point that out with pictures and fun videos, which are coming in just a minute. So you can see all these other great things that beaver ponds do, like refilling the water table and slowing down and extinguishing wildfires, all that good stuff. So here's a picture to represent that. This is from Nevada, Susie Creek on the left, the creek before beavers in the 90s. On the right, the creek after beavers in 2012. So you can just see how much more this river is more connected to its floodplain. So it's not just a single channel river, just kind of eroding away. There's so much more greenery. There's so much more habitat, obviously more water. So that's a picture that I like to share, even though it's not nearby. And then this is an example from Idaho of an area where a wildfire had just burned through a valley, and the fire skipped over the wetland, but in this photo you can even see some beaver dams, and that area remained wet, it remained green, it remained a safe haven for other wildlife during the burn. And so when we talk about beavers and wildfire, this is a great photograph to demonstrate that. Again, this is something happening a little bit more often out west. A lot of the research is coming from the Rockies and from California, but a great benefit of beavers nonetheless. And then here is a video, just a fun video demonstrating, again, beavers and wildfire. This was done by a researcher named Dr. Emily Fairfax, who made a stop motion video. I'm going to play that now. Hopefully you can hear the sound. We tested it before, but if not, it's just some banjo music, and you'll still get the gist of it. Beaver and the wetland has survived the fire. I saw this video well, a few years ago now, probably, whenever she made it, and have showed it so many times. And I've always thought, it would be so great if we had a version of this that shows how beavers help with flood attenuation, because that's an issue that we're seeing more in our area than the really catastrophic wildfires. And so I reached out, I knew that would happen. I reached out to Emily and asked if I could make a new version about flooding instead, and she said, go for it. So this is a newer kind of part 2 in the series, to show the relationship between beaver wetlands and flood attenuation. Yay! So all the people downstream in the little town here were not just completely taken out by flooding, because this beaver wetland was storing all that water upstream. So those are my only 2 fun videos I have to share. But you are welcome to get these videos from YouTube or my website and just share them, use them for educational purposes. What I hope I have conveyed here is that beavers do matter. They improve water quality, restore freshwater systems, increase biodiversity. They help with climate change issues, and they matter to other animals, plants, us, and to our planet. And so with that understanding, now we're going to get into what happens when these very beneficial critters that are native to our area, what happens when they cause problems. And so, like I shared at the beginning, I come from a background of studying human primate conflict. And when I got back from the field in Indonesia, I started to work at the Clifton Institute, which is in Fauquier County, and saw my first wild beavers, started learning about them, became fascinated, a little bit obsessed. And this whole project just kind of organically came out of me realizing that there were beavers very close to home that are causing similar problems as the monkeys that I studied, and that there were not a lot of resources for folks who, sorry, my dog is coughing. I hope you can't hear that, who have beavers on their property, want to do something, but not just resort immediately to lethal trapping. They want to know what their options are. And so I created the Human-Beaver Coexistence Fund in 2021 to educate people about why beavers matter and how we can coexist with them. A lot of people ask me, what's a human beaver when I give the name of the organization? And I often think of the Animorphs book cover and this guy right here in the middle. That's not what I'm talking about. But of course, just this relationship between humans and beavers. I come from actually the field of anthropology. And so a lot of my perspective on human wildlife conflict and coexistence is informed by social science. And so I never want people to think that like I'm only a beaver advocate at the expense of what the humans value and need. And so that's why the word human beaver hyphenated is in the name of the organization. So the two main issues that beavers cause people are tree damage and flooding. Picture here on the left of a classic beaver chewed stump with the little wood chips all around. This is very fresh chew. And then on the right, a beaver dam that has caused flooding on a road, which is, as you can imagine, one of the worst case scenarios when it comes to managing beavers non-lethally, because this becomes, of course, a human safety issue, especially in the wintertime. And you can imagine agencies like VDOT just needing to take care of this. And so beavers teach us to embrace change. both of these problems ultimately are that this critter shows up and does a lot of changing in a very short amount of time. And that's really shocking to people. So the very first thing, when someone reaches out to me who's just had a beaver show up on their property, they are kind of in shock because a section of their property that has been dry for decades suddenly has water on it. And that's very alarming. And not a lot of other animals could change so much in so little time. So my job with HBCF is to kind of help people through understanding what beavers are doing, why they're doing it, and then what's the actual problem and how do we solve it. So with these two problems, this is my most boring slide. I apologize, but there's some juicy stuff in here. With these two problems, what the options are for management or lack thereof, and those are on the left-hand side. And then along the top row are me kind of assessing each of those solutions or strategies, approaches, based on different values. So one landowner might care that it's legal, one might not. One might care it's humane, one might not. We talk about it being effective in the short term versus the long term. And then something that's very important to a lot of people is it affordable? And so with these strategies, the ones that are green are yeses across the board. And those are the ones that our organization promotes and helps people learn more about. Again, all of these are mostly acceptable legal reactions to a beaver problem. Again, not relocation, like I mentioned here in Virginia, but and a landowner can still make any decision that works for them. But this table just kind of demonstrates why we promote the strategies that we do. For tree damage, I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of this because I don't think everyone in our audience actually has an active beaver problem. But wrapping trees is a relatively simple, relatively cheap problem to solve as long as you can target individual trees. When it comes to larger stands of trees or forests, that gets trickier and a lot more expensive really fast. But if you are able to prioritize which trees you don't want beavers to harm and which ones they can have a few, then these are the materials we recommend. This is the method of wrapping the tree and fencing that we recommend. And it's kind of as simple as that. We do outreach programs where we do kind of like a volunteer work day if there are sites that have beaver damage and want to kind of double dip into teaching people about beavers and also protecting some trees. Those are fun. And like I said, it's a relatively simple thing. The picture here on the right shows what not to do. You will be surprised how easy it is, even how many people are still doing it wrong. So this tree was wrapped too close to the tree. So beavers can gnaw right through the mesh size there. And of course that tree is gonna grow and then fence might girdle the tree. So there's all kinds of little details, but if you get them right, you can protect a tree for many years with just some very simple garden fencing. Here are some photos of some of those projects that I've mentioned. And now we're going to get into flow devices. So with the problem of flooding, much more complicated than tree damage, and it happens in a number of different contexts. When I use the term flow device, what I'm referring to is the thing that is going to help a landowner or land manager address flooding caused by beavers without the beavers needing to leave that area. So we're keeping the habitat suitable for beavers while still addressing the problem that the humans have. And this can either happen at, culverts, where it's basically like a magnet for a beaver because it's like one little part of a dam that's just needs to be clogged up and then they're golden. So a lot of work at culverts and pipes that go under roads and things. This can also happen in a beaver-built dam that's backing up water in a place where there can't be tons of water. And so these are some of the standard designs that are used to address those issues. I have been trained in the Beaver Core program, which teaches people exactly how to build, design, and install these structures. And again, they're relatively simple and relatively inexpensive to build. The trick with them is that every single device has to be customized to the site where it's going in, or you risk it not working and then people assuming that flow devices as a general rule do not work. And so one of the things I love doing is just consulting with people, even if they're across the country and they've reached out to HBCF, is I can guide people on how to customize a flow device for their site by seeing pictures, looking at maps, taking some stream stats and that kind of thing. Because if you don't know the questions to ask, you might put in the wrong type of device or not consider certain factors. And that's what those of us have been trained to build these things. That's what we do. So even though it's something we could all probably build tomorrow with some easily obtainable materials, there's that nuance to it that is important because we want them to work so that more and more people will want to try them instead of trapping the beavers. So here are some pictures of flow devices that we have built and installed. They do not photograph well, folks. So I'm not going to spend too much time here. It is fun, get out in the water and get wet and mucky. And so if you are in the audience and you're like, I don't have any beaver problems, thank you so much for being here still. It means you care about these animals and there are still things that you can do to promote their coexistence and non-lethal management. Learning about beavers, talking with others, sharing some of these books, which are really incredible ways to like introduce someone to the history or the ecological benefits of beavers. Not using terms like nuisance or pest to refer to them, and just supporting organizations like HBCF who are doing this work and helping folks on the ground implement the coexistence strategies. Our organization, we do, like I said, consultations with landowners. Anyone who has a beaver problem can reach out to us, and we're going to try to help you troubleshoot no matter where you are. We do offer flow device installations in certain contexts and within a certain radius of where we operate. I am in Northern Virginia and I will go into West Virginia, most of Virginia, into Maryland. But yes, if you know anyone, just please reach out. And like I said, I can do remote consultations as well. Tree protection workshops, like I mentioned, and educational programs, just like this one. Here is Bubbles the Beaver. This is our little comic, which kind of summarizes everything that I've just said in a cute, fun way. You're again welcome. This is on our website as well. You are welcome to steal it and share it and just make people fall in love with bubbles and understand what to do and don't if there is a beaver problem. All right, this is our post-test. Which one is the beaver? What are your answers in the chat?
So we are saying all of them, all, B, all.
Yay.
Yeah.
It's all of them.
That was a good
Good
quiz.
job, everybody. These are all
Hey.
beavers. He's the cutest. That's a little baby beaver. Um, they're all also wet beavers. I'm just now realizing, except for the little baby there. Anyway, that's mostly what you see is a beaver who's just gotten out of the water. But thank you all. This is my organization's website, my email address if you want to contact me directly. We're also on social media on Facebook and Instagram. And I'll leave this up for a second, but I think what I'll do next is stop sharing my screen and take questions.
That was amazing. There are a few questions in the chat already.
Okay.
One is, how and when were beavers reintroduced in Virginia?
Ooh, that is a good question. I don't know the details on that. When was just in the 30s. I am trying to remember what I have been told about like where the beavers came from. Um, and I don't know. I don't know the specifics of that. That is a great question, and maybe a question for one of our DWR folks. But I can imagine reintroductions in the 30s versus now maybe quite different. I know it's quite a process. So when we say reintroductions aren't allowed in many states now, people are bummed because it's like, man, like I know someone who doesn't want beavers, and I know someone else who does, and can't we just move them around? And so this is a common question I get. The concerns from the state agencies are often moving disease around, moving the problem from one spot to another. We don't have necessarily tons of just open available habitat in Virginia. And in states out in the west and northwest where there are beaver relocations happening, it's quite a process. It's months and months long. It takes a lot of funding. You have to have a spot where you can quarantine beavers, and that is just not an easy thing because their requirements are so specific. And so, yeah, it's just not the easy solution that people seem to think it is. But obviously, that original reintroduction to get beavers back into their native habitat here in the state was ultimately a good thing, I think.
Yes. And you answered the second question already, which was,
Oh,
is
great.
allowing relocation a good idea?
You know, there's kind of the start of that discussion here in Virginia. I work with some folks that we've been talking about a Virginia Beaver Working Group here for a little while, and kind of what the future of that would look like in the state of Virginia. And my opinion on the whole thing, it would be great for that to be an option in certain scenarios, absolutely. But it does have to be done right. And, there are folks out like in Washington State that have been researching this for years, and they do like very in-depth analysis on habitat quality so that if you move beavers that it's actually going to be a successful introduction, and that the beavers are going to stay where you put them. And I think we could learn a lot from those existing studies, but I think, Virginia and Washington are quite different in some ways. And so we would just, it's not something I would want a state to just like jump into without having all of the information.
That makes sense. Next question is, in suburbia, what areas or kinds of habitat are beavers attracted to?
Culverts. Like retention and detention ponds, anywhere where a planner person has put in infrastructure to store water, a beaver is also going to be attracted to that spot. Beavers are more resilient than you might think. So I have seen beavers in very developed parts of Northern Virginia. They don't necessarily tend to stay in a spot as long in those cases. So, conditions are changing all the time and, maybe their dams are getting blown out more often. And they're having to kind of move around more. But there are a lot of beavers in suburbia and yeah, they love to clog up pipes and culverts and underneath roads and anywhere where where water can be stored is the kind of annoying answer.
The next one is how I believe they meant, I'm not really sure what the intention was, so maybe someone can jump in and clarify, but how did beavers develop in historical times?
Hmm. Question. Not that. How did they develop? Yeah, who wrote that? Who wrote that question? Want to unmute?
Yeah, that was
It was me. I I wrote that.
Catherine?
Yeah, I asked you in the chat. Yeah.
Do you want to re-ask it so I can understand the question?
How do beavers develop develop in develop in historical times?
Are you asking
Like you talked about how they developed in prehistory. The question is, since people have been recording their observations about beavers, have they changed in their behavior or in their features?
Yes, great question. Yes, so one of the, this is in part a tough question to answer, but there are some really great historical resources which can help me answer it. For example, a book that was, oh gosh, I'm gonna quickly see what year that was because, sorry guys, I'm Googling. 1913. So again, this is still post fur trade. It was written probably in the late 1800s. Anyway, a guy named Enos Mills, he wrote about a population of beavers in the Rocky Mountains where he observed stuff that we would never see with beavers today. Even just, 100 years ago. So there were more beavers. They lived in larger groups. They were more diurnal, which means that they were kind of out and about during the daytime a lot more than we see today. And so we have kind of observed, and that's just one example of a historical observation that we can compare with what we see about beaver behavior today. To say, as a general rule, beavers live in smaller families today, and they're more active at night, probably to avoid interactions with people. They, he also described behavior of individual beavers that was just not scared of people at all. And obviously this would be different in different kinds of habitats. This was a pretty like remote, what we would call like pristine, closer to pristine wilderness today. But yes, beavers, all species change and adapt over time to those different the different pressures that they experience. And so that's a really good question about beavers and how they've kind of become more secretive to avoid people. I hope that answers your question.
Catherine, that was a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Our next one is, do beavers leave a pond? I do have a pond with beavers, and all of a sudden it's not flooded anymore. Could they have left, or are they now satisfied with the depth of the existing pond?
Great question. Quick answer is that it could be either one, but if it's the latter and they're satisfied, you would still see a lot of chewing activity. Like you would know that they're still there. Beavers come and go in ponds all the time. And we don't know why. Sometimes I can speculate on why, and sometimes I can't. Beavers perceive things about these, ponds and habitats that we as humans cannot. And so they're absolutely, it's so normal for beavers to just be moving in and out of a habitat off and on over the years. If you have beavers in a spot for, like many years consistently, then you can assume that that's really good quality habitat. But the short answer is beavers move around constantly.
Okay, thoughts on beavers trying to build a dam across a waterway into a small marina and options to dissuade them.
I would need more information. We've got a lot of follow-up questions. Whoever asked that should email me. In general, there are ways to try and dissuade beavers from building in a certain spot. Again, a beaver chooses a spot based on factors that some of them we can understand and maybe some of them we can't quite. So, depending on how adamant they are about choosing a specific location for a dam, you might be able to dissuade them by just destroying the dam repeatedly, especially if that dam is one of the beaver's secondary dams. So typically what a beaver family will have is kind of a main pond complex, a primary dam that creates that, although not always, especially if beavers are living in farm ponds like I see a lot of here in this region. But then they'll, their goal is still, if they have a main pond that's deep enough, they're still kind of building these canals out and building smaller dams upstream to continue to slow and spread that water. And so, if it's a secondary dam in a spot where you don't want it, it's a lot easier to kind of just rip it out a few times and hope that the beavers give up because they don't actually need the dam there. But if it's a primary dam, that's going to be trickier and might be a spot where a flow device might make more sense.
Next, we have a comment. In Idaho in 1948 through 1950, the beavers were airdropped by parachute to introduce them.
That is true. That is true. You can find pictures on the internet of this happening. Beavers being dropped out of planes with parachutes. There's picture books about it for children. Yes, a very fun story. Something I'm glad we don't do anymore, but it was an innovative way to reintroduce them when it happened.
Next, we have a question. When I'm out canoeing, beavers slap their tails on the water. What are they telling me? Stay out of my territory?
Yes, that's one of the things. The tail slap is multifunctional. It is intended potentially to startle a predator or a threat. It is also used to alert the other beavers in the family that there is a threat nearby. So, for example, the kits, if they hear a tail slap and they're on land, they're going to book it underwater and back to the safety of the lodge. So it has those multiple purposes. But yeah, it means they're feeling a little bit threatened. This has happened to me too, multiple times. Obviously, if a beaver tail slaps in response to you, maybe just take that as like, maybe you're too close, or just respect the beaver's space. But it doesn't mean that you've like done something horribly wrong. But yeah, it's a warning.
Next, we have someone who said, I live by Huntley Meadows. And for those of you who don't know, that's a park not too far from Dyke Marsh in the Alexandria section of Fairfax County that has a large marsh. It says a few years ago, they built 2 dens by South Van Dorn Street. The county came and destroyed the dens with a backhoe. Do you know what happened to the beavers?
I don't know the answer to this. I do know that I've been visiting Huntley Meadows myself off and on for, a handful of years now, and I've definitely seen the beaver activity kind of moving around even in that habitat. I I would ask a clarification about dens versus dams in the question. I think it's much more likely that the county destroyed dams than dens. So that would kind of be a follow-up question I have, but I personally don't know what happened in that situation.
I'm the person that wrote that message.
Mhm.
What happened is they were on South Van Dorn Street and they were dens. They
So
built
like a lodge?
a big pile of sticks. They built it. They dammed up next to the street area that goes by Telegraph Road that leads into Huntley Meadows. They flooded the area. You can see where it flooded because it killed the trees. Now, what happened is it was okay because the water level was not interfering with anything. But they started raising the dam, which raised the water. So the water went under the street over to where Tartan Village is, where I live. And we have pretty deep barrows because there's springs coming through there. That's why they moved there, because water's always running there. So they blocked it, but then there's another establishment there with housing. I think it's a substance abuse thing where they live there. Well, they built another den in the gully on their side, and that started flooding the water next to their fence. And then the water was level to almost going under the street to our neighborhood, but it didn't really flood our neighborhood but it was, their fence was becoming the dam all along that property. So they would have been okay if they just built one nest den, but they expanded it to two. And if you drive by there, you can see where all the dead trees are, where they flooded that area. And then all of a sudden, then I saw that the county was in there with these backhoes, and they ripped up the dens, and they also went and ripped up the dam by Telegraph Road leading into Huntley Meadows to stop the I don't know what they did with the beavers.
So I like I said, I don't know this particular situation. I can't answer what happened to the beavers. I do know that it's not surprising at all for beavers to expand out from a like known territory, like an area like Huntley Meadows. I've responded to other inquiries around that area myself. Because when a beaver does have good habitat, a family, they're reproducing, and then those offspring have to disperse and find suitable habitat. And so you're going to, they try to go far-ish away from from their family group. But it's also very common that beavers, especially in more developed areas or in places where they don't have to build as many dams, they might build more lodges or dens. And so, none of what you've described surprises me. I do know that it's much more common for dams to be removed than lodges. That is not something that I would ever recommend, because I would just be concerned about the well-being of the beavers. There are other things to try, but like I said, I was not involved in this one and I don't know what happened. But thank you for sharing the story.
I know Huntley Meadows spent a lot of money because they had beavers there, and then they took all the beavers out of Huntley Meadows, and it affected the water level, and we started getting invasive plants, and they spent a lot of money taking those out. And what they did is they went behind where the tower is and put a dam that they can control the level on, because the beavers were taking all the trees down all around. So that's how they stopped it, because beavers don't like to hear running water. So they put the dam back there. But I was just curious.
Yeah, it's very complicated. I mean, removing one species and then there's always going to be ripple effects. Beavers are sometimes directly responsible for some of those changes. Sometimes they're just responding to them. These natural kind of wetlands, freshwater systems are really complex. And it's just a good reminder that you know, coexisting with an animal like the beaver isn't always easy or straightforward. But, you know, my organization is happy to, you know, consult with counties and agencies and organizations if these types of problems do arise. But it's certainly, it's not easy. So,
So do
do we
you
have any other questions?
So we have time for about one more question. Does anybody, and we do have a clarification to the what we were just hearing about from a staff member at Huntley Meadows in the chat. But does anybody have another question for Alison before we're out of time? Okay. People are saying thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you all.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. This was very informative, and we hope you'll come and visit our beaver soon.
I plan to.
And thank you, Deborah, for managing this, and thank you, everybody, for attending.
A lot more thank yous in the chat.
I can see them.
Good.
Oh, nice.
You are welcome.
Lots of hearts.